The morning sun painted the Arizona desert in shades of gold and rust as Samuel Iron worked his bellows, sending sparks dancing into the dry air. His forge stood alone, a mile from the struggling town of Red Canyon, where the sound of his hammer had become as regular as the desert wind. Sam hadn't spoken to another soul in 3 days. Not since Mrs. Santos had brought him coffee, and he'd only nodded his thanks. The silence suited him, had suited him for 3 years now, ever since the fever took Mary and little Thomas. His calloused hands moved with practiced precision, shaping a horseshoe that would probably never be paid for. Most folks in Red Canyon barely had 2 coins to rub together, but Sam kept working. The rhythm of metal on metal was the only thing that quieted the voices in his head. A movement caught his eye through the forge's open door. Small. Hesitant. A child's figure wavering in the heat shimmer like a desert mirage. Sam set down his hammer and stepped outside, squinting against the glare. The boy couldn't be more than 8 years old, barefoot and dusty, with dark hair that caught the sunlight and eyes that held too much knowledge for such a young face. His clothes were torn, his lips cracked from thirst, and he clutched his stomach with the desperate grip of true hunger. Sam felt something stir in his chest, a flutter of recognition, of memory. Thomas had looked just as small when the fever started. Without a word, Sam turned back into his forge and retrieved the half-loaf of bread Maria had brought yesterday. He broke off a generous piece and held it out to the boy, who approached with the cautious steps of a wild animal. The child took the bread and bit into it immediately, his eyes never leaving Sam's face. For a moment neither spoke. The desert wind whispered between them, carrying the scent of sage and something else, something that made Sam's skin prickle with awareness. Then the boy smiled, and Sam felt his heart crack open just a little. But as the child disappeared back into the desert heat, Sam couldn't shake the feeling that this simple act of kindness was about to change everything. That night Sam couldn't sleep. He sat on his porch, nursing a cup of bitter coffee and staring out at the star-scattered sky. The desert was never truly quiet. Coyotes called in the distance, night birds rustled in the sparse brush, and somewhere, a horse snorted and stamped. Wait! A horse? Sam set down his cup and listened more carefully. There it was again, the soft whinny of a horse, maybe 2. But who would be traveling at this hour? Traders usually made camp by sunset, and the Apache rarely used horses for night raids anymore. Not since the cavalry had been tracking their movements more closely. Sam rose from his chair and walked to the edge of his property, where his own horse, Moses, stood alert in the small corral. The old bay's ears were pricked forward, nostrils flaring as he tested the wind. "Easy, boy," Sam murmured, but his own nerves were starting to fray. In the distance, he could make out shapes moving against the star field, riders, at least a dozen, moving slowly and deliberately across the desert floor. They weren't heading toward town. They were positioning themselves around the valley, taking up posts on the low hills that surrounded his forge. Sam's mouth went dry. In all his years in Arizona, he'd never seen Apache move like this, so organized, so purposeful. This wasn't a raiding party. This was something else entirely. He thought of the boy, of those knowing eyes and that cautious smile. Had his simple act of kindness somehow marked him? In Apache culture, every gesture carried weight, every interaction could spark honor debts or blood feuds that lasted generations. The riders stopped moving. Sam counted at least 20 positions now, dark silhouettes against the hills. They were watching. Waiting. Sleep would be impossible now. Sam returned to his porch and settled into his chair, his old rifle across his knees. Whatever was coming would arrive with the dawn. As the first pale light began to creep across the eastern horizon, Sam heard it. The sound that would haunt him for the rest of his life, however long that might be. Hoofbeats. Dozens of them. Growing louder. The thunder of hooves shook the ground beneath Sam's feet as riders poured over the hills like water breaking through a dam. They came from every direction, north, south, east, and west, their horses' breath creating clouds of mist in the cool desert air. Sam stood on his porch, rifle in hand but not raised, and watched as his world was transformed. What had been empty desert moments before was now filled with Apache warriors, their faces painted for war, their spears and rifles glinting in the early light. He counted them as they took their positions, 50, 70, 90, 100 mounted warriors forming a perfect circle around his forge, each horse standing motionless as a statue carved from desert stone. The silence was absolute. Not one warrior spoke. Not one horse shifted or snorted. Even the desert wind seemed to hold its breath. At the head of the circle sat a man who could only be their chief. Tall and broad-shouldered, with silver streaking his long black hair, he wore the bearing of absolute authority. Eagle feathers decorated his war lance, and his horse, a magnificent black stallion, pawed the ground with restrained energy. Sam had heard stories about Chief Standing Bear, the Apache leader who had managed to evade capture for over a decade. Some said he was a ghost. Others claimed he could speak with spirits. Looking at him now, Sam could believe both stories. The chief raised his hand, and from somewhere in the circle came a small figure on foot. Sam's breath caught in his throat. It was the boy. The child walked through the gap in the circle of warriors, his bare feet making no sound on the hard-packed earth. He moved with the same cautious grace Sam had noticed the day before, but now there was something else, a dignity that seemed far too mature for his years. The boy stopped 10 feet from Sam's porch and spoke in clear, accented English. "My father wishes to speak with the man who showed kindness to his son." Sam felt the world tilt beneath his feet. This child, this hungry, barefoot child, was the son of Standing Bear, one of the most feared Apache chiefs in the territory. And Sam had given him bread. As the implications crashed over him, Sam realized that his simple act of kindness had indeed changed everything. The question now was whether it would save his life, or end it. Chief Standing Bear dismounted with fluid grace, his moccasined feet silent on the desert floor. He walked forward slowly, his dark eyes never leaving Sam's face, and Sam found himself studying the legendary warrior with fascination despite his fear. The chief was younger than Sam had expected, perhaps 45, with the lean build of a man who lived constantly in the saddle. Scars crossed his chest and arms, telling stories of battles fought and survived. But it was his eyes that held Sam's attention, intelligent, watchful, and surprisingly kind. Standing Bear stopped at the edge of the porch and spoke in heavily accented English. "You are the blacksmith who gave food to my son." It wasn't a question, but Sam nodded anyway. His throat felt like sandpaper. "I am." Without asking his name. Without asking his people. Without asking for payment. "He was hungry," Sam said simply. The chief studied him for a long moment, then turned to look at his son. The boy stood straight and proud, but Sam could see exhaustion in his small shoulders. There was a story here, Sam realized, about why a chief's son had been wandering alone, barefoot and starving, in the desert. 3 days ago, Standing Bear said, turning back to Sam, "my son was taken by Apache-hating miners from Silver Creek. They planned to sell him to the cavalry as a guide to our sacred places." Sam's stomach dropped. He'd heard rumors about such things, Apache children kidnapped and forced to betray their own people's hiding places. It was a practice that sickened even hardened frontier settlers. "Little Wolf escaped in the night," the chief continued. "He wandered for 2 days without food or water, growing weak, growing lost. When hope was nearly gone, he found you." The warrior's eyes grew intense, and Sam felt the weight of judgment pressing down on him. "In Apache law," Standing Bear said, "a life debt is sacred. You saved my son's life. This cannot go unanswered." Sam's hand tightened on his rifle. Around the circle, 100 warriors sat motionless, waiting for their chief's command. The morning sun was climbing higher, and heat waves had begun to dance across the desert floor. "I don't want payment," Sam said quietly. "I just saw a hungry child." Standing Bear's expression shifted, and for the first time, something that might have been surprise flickered across his features. "You refuse the sacred debt?" he asked. "I don't understand the sacred debt," Sam admitted. "I only understand that a child was hungry, and I had bread." The silence stretched between them like a taut rope. Sam could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears, could smell the sweat of horses and the sage-scented wind. Then Chief Standing Bear did something that no one, either Sam nor the 100 warriors watching, had expected. He smiled. "You speak truth," Standing Bear said, his smile transforming his entire face. "This is why the spirits guided my son to your forge." The chief gestured to his warriors, and as one they lowered their weapons. The tension in the air eased fractionally, but Sam kept his grip on his rifle. He'd lived in Apache country long enough to know that situations could change in an instant. "Sit with me, Blacksmith," Standing Bear said, settling cross-legged on the hard ground. "We have much to discuss." Sam hesitated, then set his rifle aside and sat on his porch steps. The wooden boards were already warm from the climbing sun. "My son tells me you work alone," the chief began. "That your forge knows no other voices." "That's right," Sam said. He glanced at Little Wolf, who had moved to sit beside his father. The boy was watching him with those two knowing eyes. "This is a hard way to live," Standing Bear observed. "A man alone is like a single arrow, easily broken. A man with family is like a bundle of arrows, strong, unbreakable." Sam felt familiar pain twist in his chest. "I had a family once. And now you have only silence and iron. It's enough." Standing Bear studied him with those penetrating eyes. "Is it? When my son spoke of you, he used the Apache word Tsainalti. It means the one who gives without expecting. Such men are rare in any tribe, any people." The chief paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of ceremony. "The sacred debt must be paid. This is the way of my people, the way of honor. But you are not Apache. You do not understand our ways. So I will explain." Standing Bear reached into a leather pouch and withdrew something that made Sam's breath catch, a piece of silver, worked into the shape of a wolf, with turquoise eyes that seemed to glow in the morning light. "This was my grandfather's," the chief said. "And his grandfather's before him. It carries the strength of 7 generations of my family. I offer it to you as payment for the life of my son." Sam stared at the exquisite piece. Even in his simple forge, he could recognize masterwork when he saw it. This wasn't just valuable, it was priceless, irreplaceable. "I can't accept that," he said. "Then you leave me with only one alternative," Standing Bear replied, his voice growing grave. Around the circle, the warriors tensed again. Horses shifted restlessly. "If you will not accept payment for the sacred debt," the chief said slowly, "then I must offer you something else. Something that cannot be refused." Sam's mouth went dry. "What?" Standing Bear's eyes locked with his, and when he spoke, his words carried the finality of mountain stone. "I offer you a place in my tribe. I offer you a new family, Blacksmith. I offer you the chance to forge more than iron, to forge a destiny that will echo through the generations." The desert fell silent again, waiting for Sam's answer. Around them, 100 Apache warriors sat motionless, witnesses to a moment that would change the course of history in the Arizona Territory. Sam Iron, widowed Blacksmith, felt his world shifting beneath him once again. Sam stared at Chief Standing Bear, certain he had misheard. "You're asking me to join your tribe?" "Not asking," the chief replied calmly. "Offering. There is a difference. But I'm white. I'm not Apache." Standing Bear's expression didn't change. "Blood does not make a man Apache. Character does. Honor does. The willingness to protect family with your life, this makes a man Apache." Little Wolf spoke for the first time since the formal introductions, his young voice carrying surprising authority. "You have the heart of our people, Iron Maker. I saw it when you gave bread without questions." Sam looked around the circle of warriors. Their faces were unreadable, but he could sense their attention, their judgment. This wasn't just about him anymore, it was about their chief's honor, their tribe's sacred laws. "I don't speak your language," Sam said weakly. "I don't know your customs. Language can be learned. Customs can be taught. Standing Bear leaned forward. But the spirit that moved you to feed a hungry child, this cannot be taught. This you already possess. The sun was climbing higher, and sweat began to bead on Sam's forehead. He thought of his empty forge, his silent evenings, the endless succession of days that stretched ahead with nothing but work and solitude. Then he thought of Mary and Thomas, buried in the small cemetery behind Red Canyon. Would joining an Apache tribe be a betrayal of their memory? What would I do? He asked. I'm a blacksmith, not a warrior. We have need of both. Standing Bear replied. The white man's weapons break. The white man's tools grow dull. You could serve my people with your skills, and they would serve you with their loyalty. And if I refuse? The chief was quiet for a long moment. Then the sacred debt remains unpaid, and my honor is stained. This I cannot allow. The implication hung heavy in the morning air. Sam wasn't being given a choice between joining the tribe and walking away. He was being given a choice between joining the tribe and dying. But as he looked into Standing Bear's eyes, Sam saw something unexpected: hope. This wasn't a threat delivered by a brutal war chief. This was a genuine offer from a man who saw potential for something greater. How long do I have to decide? Sam asked. The sun will reach its highest point in 4 hours, Standing Bear said. When it begins to fall toward the west, I must have your answer. The chief rose gracefully to his feet, and Little Wolf followed. We will make camp by the creek while you consider. But know this, Iron Maker, whatever you decide will echo through both our peoples for generations to come. As father and son walked back toward the circle of warriors, Sam remained on his porch steps, surrounded by 100 Apache riders, facing the most impossible choice of his life. In the distance, a hawk cried out, its call echoing across the desert like a warning of storms to come. Sam sat alone on his porch as the Apache made their temporary camp by the creek. They moved with practiced efficiency. Horses watered and hobbled, small cooking fires started, weapons cleaned and checked. It was like watching a well-orchestrated dance, every movement purposeful and coordinated. He could see Little Wolf helping with the horses, his small hands gentle but confident as he rubbed down the mounts. The boy belonged here, among these people, in a way Sam had never belonged anywhere since Mary and Thomas died. The memory hit him like a physical blow. Thomas had been 8 years old, the same age as Little Wolf, when the fever took him. Sam remembered sitting by his son's bed, watching the life drain from the small face, powerless to stop it despite all his strength and skill. Papa, Thomas had whispered in his final moments. Will you take care of Mama when I'm gone? But Sam hadn't been able to take care of anyone. The fever had claimed Mary 3 days later, and Sam had been left alone with his grief and his useless, empty hands. Señor Sam? He looked up to find Maria Santos approaching on her old mule, a basket balanced on her hip. The Mexican shopkeeper had been one of the few people who hadn't given up trying to talk to him over the past 3 years. Maria, he said, standing. You shouldn't be here. It's not safe. She glanced at the Apache camp and shrugged. Life is not safe, amigo. But living in fear is not living at all. She held up the basket. I brought coffee and tortillas. Thought you might be hungry. Sam accepted the basket gratefully. How did you know about? He gestured toward the warriors. The whole town knows. Deputy Morgan rode out at dawn to telegram the cavalry. Maria's dark eyes were serious. They say Standing Bear has come to kill the blacksmith who helped his son. Is that what they're saying? See. But I know you, Sam Iron. You would not harm a child, Apache or otherwise. She studied his face. What did you do? Sam told her about the bread, about Little Wolf's true identity, about the sacred debt, and Standing Bear's impossible offer. When he finished, Maria was quiet for a long time. You know what this means, she finally said. If you join them, you become enemy of your own people. The cavalry will hunt you. The settlers will shoot you on sight. And if I don't join them? Then you die today with honor intact. Sam looked out at the desert, where heat waves danced like spirits above the sand. Sometimes I think dying might be easier. Maria's hand cracked across his face before he saw it coming. The slap echoed across the quiet yard, and several Apache warriors looked up from their tasks. "Cobard!" she hissed. "Coward! You think your Mary and Thomas would want you to give up? To choose death over life?" Sam's cheek stung, but Maria wasn't finished. "I knew your family, Sam Iron. Your Thomas had dreams of being a blacksmith like his papa. Your Mary talked about the good you could do for people, the horseshoes for poor farmers, the tools for those who couldn't pay." Her eyes blazed with righteous anger. "They would want you to live. They would want you to do good in this world." As Maria climbed back onto her mule and rode toward town, Sam felt something shift inside him. For the first time in 3 years, he could almost hear Mary's voice, not in the silence of grief but in the memory of love. And what he heard made his choice suddenly, startlingly clear. The sun had reached its zenith when dust clouds appeared on the eastern horizon. Sam shaded his eyes and counted the riders, a dozen men in blue cavalry uniforms, led by Deputy Tom Morgan on his familiar roan mare. Standing Bear emerged from his camp and walked slowly back toward the forge. The chief's face was impassive, but Sam could sense the tension coiling in his frame like a spring under pressure. "The blue soldiers come," Standing Bear said simply. "I can see that. This changes nothing. The sacred debt must still be paid." Sam nodded. "I know." Deputy Morgan rode ahead of his men, stopping just outside the circle of Apache warriors. The young lawman looked nervous but determined, his hand resting on his sidearm. "Sam Iron!" he called out. "Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Tom," Sam replied, not moving from his position between the chief and the approaching cavalry. "We received word that you were being held hostage by hostiles," Morgan said, his eyes never leaving Standing Bear. "We're here to negotiate your release." Standing Bear spoke without turning toward the deputy. "There are no hostiles here, Blue Coat. Only Apache who honor the old ways." Morgan's jaw tightened. "Chief Standing Bear, I presume. You and your warriors are on United States territory. I'm going to have to ask you to withdraw." "This land was Apache before it was American," the chief replied. "We go where we choose." The tension ratcheted higher. Sam could see fingers moving toward triggers, could smell the metallic scent of fear and aggression mixing in the desert air. "Tom," Sam called out, "there's no hostage situation here. This is a negotiation." "What kind of negotiation requires 100 armed warriors?" Morgan demanded. Before Sam could answer, one of the cavalry troopers, a young man with nervous eyes, shouted, "Movement in the rocks!" Every head turned toward the low hills surrounding the forge. More Apache warriors were emerging from concealment, not just a few, but dozens. They had been there all along, watching, waiting. The 100 riders in the circle weren't Standing Bear's entire force. They were just the visible portion. Morgan's face went pale as he realized the true scope of what they were facing. The cavalry were outnumbered 5-1, maybe more. "Chief Standing Bear," the deputy said, his voice carefully controlled, "I don't want bloodshed here today. Nor do I, Blue Coat. But I will have satisfaction for the sacred debt." "What sacred debt?" Standing Bear looked at Sam, a question in his dark eyes. Sam took a deep breath and made his decision. "The sacred debt he owes me," Sam said loudly, his voice carrying across the desert stillness. "For saving his son's life." Morgan stared at him in confusion. "I don't understand." "Then listen carefully, deputy," Sam continued, feeling the weight of history settling on his shoulders. "Because what happens next is going to change everything." Sam walked to the center of the space between the Apache camp and the cavalry, feeling the eyes of both peoples upon him. The desert wind picked up, stirring the dust around his boots and carrying the scent of sage and distant storms. "3 days ago," he began, his voice strong and clear, "I gave bread to a hungry child. Yesterday, I learned that child was Little Wolf, son of Chief Standing Bear." Deputy Morgan's confusion deepened. "Sam, what does this have to do with—" "Everything, Tom. In Apache law, saving a life creates a sacred debt. Standing Bear has offered to pay that debt by giving me a place in his tribe. The silence that followed was deafening. Sam could hear his own heartbeat, could feel the weight of decision pressing down on him like the noon sun. And? Morgan asked, though Sam could see in the deputy's eyes that he already knew the answer. And I accept. The reaction was immediate and explosive. The cavalry troopers shouted in outrage, several drawing their weapons. The Apache warriors remained still but alert, ready to respond to any threat. Deputy Morgan raised his hand, calling for calm, but his face had gone ashen. Sam, he said urgently, you don't understand what you're saying. If you go with them, you become an enemy of the United States. You'll be branded a traitor, a renegade. There'll be no going back. I understand perfectly. Standing Bear stepped forward, his expression grave but satisfied. You choose the Apache way? I choose the way of honor, Sam replied. The way that says a man should have family, should have purpose beyond his own grief. You're making a mistake, Morgan said desperately. These people are savages. They'll torture you, kill you when you're no longer useful. Sam felt anger flare in his chest, but it was Standing Bear who responded, his voice cutting like a blade. Blue Coat speaks of savages? Who takes children from their families to break their spirits in white schools? Who breaks treaties like dry sticks? Who poisons water holes and burns food stores to starve women and children? That's different. It is not different. It is war. And in war, all men become capable of savagery. The chief's eyes burned with intensity. But the Iron Maker has shown me that some men can choose honor even when surrounded by hatred. Little Wolf stepped forward from the Apache camp, moving to stand beside his father and Sam. The boy looked up at the blacksmith with trust and gratitude shining in his young face. You saved my son, Standing Bear continued. Now I offer to save you from the emptiness that devours your spirit. This is the Apache way, strength through family, purpose through service to the tribe. Deputy Morgan shook his head. Sam, if you do this, I can't protect you. The cavalry will hunt you. Bounty hunters will come for you. You'll be a marked man. Sam looked at the young deputy, a good man trying to do his job in an impossible situation. Tom, for 3 years I've been a dead man walking. At least this way, I'll be alive when they kill me. As if summoned by his words, thunder rumbled in the distance, though the sky remained clear. Storm clouds were building beyond the mountains, promising rain and change. Sam Iron, widowed blacksmith, was about to become something entirely new. The question was whether he would live long enough to discover what that might be. If this is truly your choice, Standing Bear said formally, then it must be done properly, according to the old ways. The chief turned to his warriors and spoke in rapid Apache. Sam caught only a few words. He recognized Sainalti, the giver, and Dinzin, strong heart, but the meaning was clear from the reaction. Warriors began dismounting, forming a large circle around the forge. Deputy Morgan watched in growing alarm. Sam, whatever they're planning, is none of your concern, Blue Coat, Standing Bear interrupted. The Iron Maker has chosen. Now he must prove himself worthy of that choice. Little Wolf approached Sam carrying something wrapped in soft deerskin. When he unfolded the bundle, Sam's breath caught. Inside was a shirt of the finest buckskin he'd ever seen, decorated with intricate beadwork and dyed porcupine quills. Eagle feathers hung from the shoulders, and the front bore the image of a wolf outlined in silver thread. This belonged to my brother, Standing Bear explained. He died fighting the Bluecoats at Apache Pass. His spirit will watch over you as you take your place among us. I can't accept this, Sam said, overwhelmed by the honor being shown him. You must. To refuse would be to reject not just the gift, but the memory of the warrior who wore it. With trembling hands, Sam accepted the shirt. The deerskin was incredibly soft, worked until it felt like silk against his fingers. As he held it up, he could see that the beadwork told a story: warriors on horseback, eagles soaring, and at the center, a forge with flames reaching toward the sky. How? He whispered. Standing Bear's eyes held a hint of ancient mystery. The women of my tribe have many skills, Ironmaker. They can see the future in their dreams. The Apache warriors began to sing, a low, rhythmic chant that seemed to rise from the earth itself. The sound sent shivers down Sam's spine, awakening something primal and forgotten in his blood. Remove your white man's clothes, Standing Bear commanded. Leave behind what you were. Become what you are meant to be. Sam hesitated, acutely aware of Deputy Morgan and the cavalry watching every move. But the singing grew stronger, and Little Wolf stepped forward with encouraging eyes. The white man's shame has no place here, Standing Bear said gently. Among the Apache, a man's worth is measured by his deeds, not the scars on his body. Sam slowly removed his sweat-stained shirt and worn trousers, feeling the desert air touch skin that had known only the heat of his forge for months. As he pulled on the sacred buckskin shirt, he felt a transformation beginning, not just of clothing, but of identity itself. The Apache chanting reached a crescendo as Standing Bear approached with a small clay pot. Inside was paint, red and black, mixed with sacred herbs that filled the air with the scent of sage and sweetgrass. I mark you now as Apache, the chief said, dipping his fingers in the paint. These symbols will tell all who see you that you are under the protection of the Wolf clan. The paint was cool against Sam's forehead as Standing Bear drew careful symbols. A wolf's paw over his left eye, lightning bolts on his cheeks. Each mark felt like a covenant, a promise he was making not just to these people but to himself. Deputy Morgan could stand it no longer. This is insane! Sam, you're a United States citizen! I can't let you! The sharp crack of a rifle split the air. Everyone froze. The shot had come from the hills behind the cavalry, where more Apache warriors had been watching. But no one was hit. It was a warning. Standing Bear's voice cut through the sudden silence. The ceremony is sacred, Blue Coat. Interrupted again, and the next shot will not miss. Morgan's hand moved toward his weapon, but his sergeant grabbed his arm. Sir, the older man whispered urgently. We're surrounded. If shooting starts, we're all dead. As the paint dried on his face, Sam felt the last of his old life falling away like shed snakeskin. Samuel Iron, widowed blacksmith, was dying. In his place, something new was being born. But just as Standing Bear raised his hand to speak the final words of the ceremony, a new sound echoed across the desert, the distant blast of a train whistle, growing closer. The railroad was coming to Red Canyon, bringing with it the full might of American civilization. And Sam was about to become its enemy. The train whistle grew louder, its mechanical shriek cutting through the sacred atmosphere like a blade. Standing Bear's hand paused in mid-gesture, and every Apache warrior turned toward the sound. The Iron Horse, Little Wolf whispered, his young voice filled with a mixture of awe and dread. Sam had heard that the railroad was planning to extend its line through Red Canyon, but he hadn't expected it so soon. The timing couldn't have been worse, or more symbolic. Just as he was abandoning his white identity, the ultimate symbol of white expansion was arriving at his doorstep. Deputy Morgan seized the moment. That'll be Colonel Hayes with reinforcements, he called out, though Sam could hear the uncertainty in his voice. This changes things, Chief. You need to withdraw your warriors now, before this becomes a massacre. Standing Bear's face had turned to stone. The Apache do not flee from iron horses or blue coats. But Sam could see the calculation in the chief's eyes. 150 Apache warriors were a formidable force against a dozen cavalry troopers. Against a trainload of soldiers with modern rifles and artillery, the outcome would be very different. The train's whistle blasted again, closer now. Through the heat shimmer, Sam could make out a dark smudge on the horizon, growing larger as it approached the newly laid tracks that curved around the eastern edge of the valley. The ceremony must be completed, Standing Bear said firmly. Sacred rites cannot be left unfinished. Little Wolf tugged at his father's sleeve and spoke rapidly in Apache. The chief listened, then nodded grimly. The locomotive came into full view as it rounded the bend, black smoke billowing from its stack like a funeral pyre. But what made Sam's blood run cold wasn't the train itself, it was what followed behind it. Car after car of settlers, their canvas-covered wagons loaded on flatbeds, their livestock penned in cattle cars. This wasn't just a military transport. This was a full colonization effort, bringing hundreds of families to claim Apache land. Sweet Jesus! Deputy Morgan breathed, finally understanding the scope of what was unfolding. Standing Bear's jaw tightened as he counted the cars. 40 families, he said quietly. Maybe more. They come to build their wooden lodges where my people have hunted for 1,000 seasons. The Apache warriors began to murmur among themselves, their voices carrying anger and something deeper, the sound of a people watching their world disappear beneath the wheels of progress. Sam felt torn between two loyalties that had formed in the space of a single morning. The people on that train were his people, Americans seeking new lives, families with children who dreamed of fresh starts. But the warriors surrounding him were also becoming his people, bound to him by sacred ceremony and shared purpose. We have to stop this, Little Wolf said, his young voice filled with desperate determination. We cannot let them take our sacred places. No, Sam said firmly, surprising everyone including himself. We don't stop them. We meet them. Standing Bear turned to him with raised eyebrows. Explain. Your son was taken by miners who wanted to use him against his own people. That was evil. But these settlers, most of them don't even know they're building on Apache land. They've been told it's empty desert, free for the taking. The train was slowing now, steam hissing as the engineer spotted the massive gathering around the forge. Sam could see faces pressed against windows, could imagine the fear and confusion of families who had expected to find a peaceful valley. What do you propose, Iron Maker? Standing Bear asked. Sam looked at the train, then at the Apache warriors, then at Deputy Morgan's anxious face. An idea was forming, dangerous, probably impossible, but perhaps their only hope of avoiding a bloodbath. I propose we give them a choice, Sam said. The same choice you gave me. They can stay and live according to Apache law, respecting the land and the people who were here first. Or they can leave and find somewhere else to build their dreams. And if they refuse both options? Sam met the chief's eyes. Then we defend what's sacred. Together. The train whistle gave one final blast as the locomotive ground to a complete stop, steam surrounding it like morning mist. In the sudden silence, Sam could hear children crying and adults shouting questions in a dozen different languages. The real test was about to begin. 3 figures climbed down from the train's passenger car, and Sam immediately recognized one of them, Colonel James Hayes, the territorial military commander, his blue uniform crisp despite the desert heat. Beside him walked a tall woman in a practical traveling dress, her medical bag marking her as the doctor Sam had heard was coming to establish a clinic in Red Canyon. But it was the third figure that made Sam's heart sink. Jeremiah Pike, the mining company representative who had been pushing for Apache removal for months, his face already red with outrage as he took in the scene before him. What in God's name is happening here? Pike shouted, his voice carrying across the desert. Morgan! Why are you allowing this gathering? Deputy Morgan urged his horse forward to meet the delegation, clearly relieved to have superior authority take charge. Sir, the situation is complicated. Colonel Hayes surveyed the scene with professional calm, the Apache warriors, the ceremonial paint on Sam's face, the tension crackling in the air like electricity before a storm. I can see that, Deputy. Chief Standing Bear, I presume? The Apache leader stepped forward with dignity. I am Standing Bear of the Chiricahua Apache. You trespass on the sacred lands of my people. According to the Treaty of... Pike began. According to your treaty, Standing Bear interrupted. My people were promised these lands in perpetuity. Yet here comes your iron horse, carrying invaders to steal what was guaranteed by your own words. Dr. Elizabeth Hayes, Sam assumed she was the colonel's wife, spoke for the first time, her voice calm but firm. Chief Standing Bear, these families have traveled 2,000 miles to start new lives. They've invested everything they own in this venture. And my people have lived here for 1,000 seasons, the chief replied. Which claim is stronger? Sam stepped forward, feeling the weight of his new identity, and the paint still drying on his face. There might be another way. Colonel Hayes stared at him in shock. My God, Iron, what have they done to you? They've given me a choice, Sam replied. The same choice I'm going to offer to everyone on that train. Pike's face turned purple. This is preposterous. Iron's clearly been coerced, probably tortured. We should arrest Standing Bear immediately and start a war that will cost hundreds of lives. Sam shot back. Is that what you want, Pike? Because that's exactly what will happen if you try to force these families onto Apache land without Apache consent. Dr. Hayes studied Sam's face carefully. You speak of choice. What choice? Sam looked back at Standing Bear, who nodded almost imperceptibly. The chief was willing to hear his proposal. The choice to live according to the laws of the land, Sam said. To recognize Apache sovereignty over the sacred places. To share rather than steal. Impossible, Pike sputtered. These people have legal claims. Legal according to laws the Apache never agreed to, Sam countered. But we're not talking about legality anymore. We're talking about survival. Colonel Hayes was quiet for a long moment, his experienced eyes taking in the positioning of Apache warriors, the obvious preparation for battle, the absolute determination in Standing Bear's face. What exactly are you proposing, Iron? He asked finally. Sam took a deep breath. A new kind of treaty. One written not in Washington, but here, between the people who have to live with its consequences. As if summoned by his words, the first drops of rain began to fall from the storm clouds that had been building beyond the mountains. The desert started to steam, filling the air with the scent of wet earth and new possibilities. But Pike was already shaking his head violently, and Sam could see other opposition forming in the colonel's thoughtful expression. This was going to be even harder than he had hoped. The rain began in earnest now, transforming the dusty desert into a canvas of rich earth tones. Apache warriors dismounted and led their horses to whatever shelter they could find, while settlers peered anxiously from the train windows at the gathering storm, both meteorological and human. Colonel Hayes called for a temporary shelter to be erected between the train and the forge, using canvas from the supply cars. Within minutes, a makeshift meeting space took shape, with representatives from all sides gathering under the drumming rain. Sam found himself in the surreal position of sitting between two worlds, Standing Bear on his right, Colonel Hayes on his left, with Dr. Hayes, Deputy Morgan, and the furious Pike completing the circle. Let me understand this clearly, Colonel Hayes began, his voice cutting through the sound of rain on canvas. You're suggesting these families abandon their legal claims and accept Apache governance? I'm suggesting they recognize the reality of the situation, Sam replied. Look around you, Colonel. Standing Bear has enough warriors here to wipe out everyone on that train. But he's chosen to talk instead of fight. That should tell you something about his character. Pike slammed his fist on the improvised table. This is blackmail. Extortion. We cannot negotiate with savages who... Standing Bear's hand moved to his knife hilt, and the temperature in the tent dropped 10 degrees. Mr. Pike, Dr. Hayes said quickly, perhaps you should choose your words more carefully. The Iron Maker speaks truth, Standing Bear said, his voice deadly calm. I could have killed everyone here before the sun reached its peak. Instead, I offer the chance for peace. What kind of peace? Colonel Hayes asked pragmatically. Standing Bear looked to Sam, who had become the unofficial translator between worlds. Sam cleared his throat and began outlining the plan that had been forming in his mind. Shared governance, he said. The Apache retain authority over sacred sites and hunting grounds. The settlers established their town, but according to Apache law regarding the land. No mining in sacred places. No poisoning of water sources. No cutting of sacred trees. And in return? Dr. Hayes prompted. The Apache provide protection from raiders and bandits. They share knowledge of desert survival, medicinal plants, water sources. They allow trade and peaceful passage through their territory. Pike laughed bitterly. And who enforces this fantasy agreement? Who ensures the savages keep their word? This time it was Deputy Morgan who spoke up. The same law that would enforce any other treaty, Pike. The difference is, this one would be made by people who actually have to live here. Colonel Hayes was quiet, clearly weighing the military implications. Chief Standing Bear, what assurance do I have that your warriors won't simply attack these families once they're established and vulnerable? The same assurance I have that your soldiers will not come to drive my people from their ancestral lands, the chief replied. We each accept the word of the other, or we fight until only one side remains. Through the canvas walls, they could hear children crying on the train, could smell the smoke from hastily built fires as families tried to prepare meals in the rain. These were real people with real dreams, not pawns in a political game. There's something else, Sam said quietly. Something that might make this work for everyone. All eyes turned to him, and Sam felt the weight of history pressing down on his shoulders. What he was about to propose would either save dozens of lives or get them all killed. The railroad, he said. It doesn't have to end here. Explain, Colonel Hayes said tersely. Sam stood and walked to the tent's opening, gesturing toward the train that sat steaming in the rain. The railroad company wants a route through Apache territory to reach the silver mines in the Dragoon Mountains. Pike's been pushing for military removal of the Apache to clear the way. That's no secret, Pike said defensively. But what if there was a better way? Sam continued. What if the Apache became partners instead of obstacles? Standing Bear's eyebrows rose. Partners? Think about it, Sam said, warming to his theme. The Apache know every pass, every water source, every safe route through the mountains. You could guide the railroad through the safest, most efficient path, avoiding the sacred places entirely. Pike was already shaking his head. Impossible. We can't trust. You can't afford not to trust them, Sam interrupted. How many survey teams have you lost to Apache attacks? How many work crews? How much money has the railroad company spent on military escorts that accomplished nothing? Colonel Hayes leaned forward. Go on. The Apache provides safe passage for construction crews, protection for work camps, guidance through the territory. In exchange, they receive a percentage of the railroad's profits from the route, employment for any Apache who want to work on the line, and guaranteed protection of their sacred sites. Dr. Hayes spoke thoughtfully. It would certainly be more cost-effective than constant military campaigns. More than that, Sam said. It would be sustainable. Military force creates resistance. Partnership creates investment in success. Standing Bear had been listening intently, his dark eyes weighing every word. Now he spoke. The white man's iron horse has brought only death to my people. Why should we help it spread across our land? Because it's going to spread anyway, Sam said bluntly. The question is whether your people profit from it or die fighting it. The tent fell silent except for the drumming rain. Through the canvas walls, they could hear settlers moving around the train, trying to set up temporary camps in the storm. Pike finally found his voice. Even if I agreed to this insanity, which I don't, I have no authority to negotiate railroad policy. But you have authority to recommend, Colonel Hayes pointed out. And my report to Washington will carry considerable weight. There's more, Sam said. The settlement that gets established here, it could be different from other frontier towns. A place where Apache and white families actually live together, trade together, build together. You're talking about a completely new kind of community, Dr. Hayes said slowly. I'm talking about survival, Sam replied. For everyone. Standing Bear rose and walked to the tent's opening, staring out at the rain-soaked desert. When he turned back, his face was thoughtful. If we do this thing, he said carefully, if we help build this iron road, what guarantee do we have that more trains will not bring more armies to drive us out? Sam met his eyes. The guarantee that you'll own part of the railroad. Partners aren't driven out. Partners are protected. Outside, thunder rumbled across the desert, and Sam realized that the storm was both literal and metaphorical. They were standing at the center of forces that could reshape the entire territory. The question was whether they were brave enough to try.